Hello, big people. I've been speaking about the nature of debate. It contains quality slash aspect slash nature in the plurals being generated from that inside the identity of hyper-relativity. That English was not just more probably, but was demonstrably revealed to teach, appreciating how the sciences share an identity. It is demonstrated where and how boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share group the identity the sciences share. And they're about fighting, but they're about fighting by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since semi ancient times. It is hyper-evidentially recorded that it has been self-valued at countries A through Z, how the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient times, because this breaching method correctly knew, with no one fathomed it would be capable of doing. No one fathomed that it could make everyone forget what nature is increasingly demonstrating to us, Black pupils. For example, we have Black pupils slash whites of eyes. We have the same color eyes, and there are exceptions. Some people have the same color eyes with the exceptions too. In other words, we have the other species bodies have two eyes. In other words, there's a shared identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that as a value progression system. That means makes means from nowhere. So where things like that appear to be debatable or not, where and how exceptions appear to be, because mass faked exceptions. For example, of the legitimacy of integrity. For example, everyone attacks the leaders, individuals, as parties leaders or alternatives. In other words, everyone's trying to diagnose mental health and physical conditions, including as doctors. I'm not a doctor. For example, one of the things that was left out from the debate, which had more there's a YouTube channel called Judging Freedom with a Judge Napolitano. He has a Colonel Douglas McGregor. He also has, in other words, there are serious things going on in the world. All kind of people are being killed, have been killed. For example, in Palestine, in Israel, in Ukraine, in Russia. Years before those conflicts, I recorded proofs that I was conscious of their roles with wire crime acts and methods, communication racketeering, worse than war crimes method, /S roles, which we all know. It can be discerned if we have Black pupils, whites of eyes, and we are honest, and we have understanding of American history. Damage control. Because A through Z, the best teachers on American history and the worst, formally, their voices in the communications, the only ones we're allowed to hear, they are measured and maintained, leaving out and having left out how the founders behind James Madison and his plan are the ones who went and got George Washington to help them with their plan. And that plan was to counter-extort, force the other founders to be. Because it was against the rules, not just of the countries that were the possessions of those colonies, that possessed those colonies, also through international companies, also fighting with themselves, also altogether a nature of unity, self-valued because of things like wars, the overt negatives and the overt positives were collusions to keep the identity of the breaching, the human fact-cheating nature breaching method, the human sciences abridgment, and made self-valued roles with it. This is also what witch trials are about, regardless of whether they were made up or not. Obviously, witch trials are inseparable from what slavery is about. Obviously, slavery is inseparable from those laws and from the causes of them. We have the breaching method showed all identities of sophistication, needs means to fake it until they never make it. This is why and how. This breaching method employed lie progressions from since before databases with computers, before our founders were born. When America's founders were born, there was already, no one had free speech, and everyone had to pretend otherwise they were sensed, even if that body was a majority of people, even if it was everybody. At A through Z, since before modern names, A through Z. So they would only remember being rising on abridged. Because all locations, areas, and states, no matter how powerful a leader could get, no matter how powerful a group of countries, this breaching method made all groupings of humanity hurt other things, others, and ourselves, and or help them. Exactly, because it needs every identity of a transnational criminal insidiousness nature body or group, or interstate, like a criminal enterprise, or like a terrorist group, or like a warring country. Not one war has been treated properly relative to this. In other words, this is also why and how Tucker Carlson, a smart kid, a well-educated, young man, cut off and could not. I don't believe it was totally honestly, but to an extent it was honest too. But he couldn't understand what Vladimir Putin. There are the videos of his meeting with Putin. I did one on that. In other words, but just the aspect of it, because this is what we are not being allowed to speak about here. People are pretending they don't understand us, and they're getting away with it because of the roles with mass fabricated audio and video transcripts, phone records that agencies have roles with. See, they were showing me WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, and WTNH has roles with police forms and security at all the ages and natures of campuses, with connections relative to maintenance of manifest, inter, and intra campuses. Also, what is inter and intra culture? Cultures A through Z abridged, voicings of for themselves and for humanities. Employment by the hyper-relativity, the identity of hyper-relativity that has A through Z. Now, as systems individually grouped and together, tactical terror from its own. And pretend you got everyone speaking for humanity anyway. So locations, areas, and states, no matter how powerful a leader could get, they already had the their oaths taking, the meaning of it. Before people took the oaths, even if they take it as kids secretly, especially, there is a method that has complete strangers and others pretending passions and emotions, and then further in years at locations, on and off campuses, at corners and things like that, while others take pictures, where and how they've been pretending people are liars, with how they've been discrediting people who tell truth at all formal locations. And the difference of that is also used, meaning you can't just blame one thing, because it's also all sides of criminal and civil cases at the same time, including the lawyers, including their family members, including the family members of the interbranch, including the family members of the on off the corrections offices, including the families and names tied to on and off the state judicial branch offices, all along roads and routes. See, this breaching method makes the sequence shifts, makes other quality aspects in nature of influences to main self-value, how there is being and has been quality aspects in nature slash S as criminal insidiousness, like mass wrongdoers, mass wrongdoing, and predicate acts with facts method roles, and natures of motivations, styles manifest pretending that people have opinions or could make debate legitimate. See, one of the things the World Trade Center attack was involved with, and these are election crimes, no matter who gets in office. The agencies have been showing faked with Wethersfield Police and other Connecticut police departments with the same house slash S. Timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic. They also bring these things up and then sequence shift, and they do words of, and the difference of it is if you say nothing about instances. The same people involved with the police phones, faked audio and video transcripts with police over the phones, changed ones, faked digital, changed ones. These are mass evidence racketeering roles, worse than war crimes, with readings of statutes, predicate acts with facts, methods, roles, needs and natures, need to pretend other can't do it without self-evaluating. This being and having been, stacking predicate acts with facts between campuses, and then making confessions through communications, which is distinct from what is said, which is also being and having been employed by the breaching method. Because we have black pupils, whites of eyes, honesty, especially then simultaneously when everyone understands why and how George Washington agreed to help the founders behind James Madison and to use their plan, the plan of James Madison, to counter, extort, and force other founders to be. And everyone had to hide their motivations because everyone's speech in nature was measured and maintained by a sick breaching method. That's why you don't separate the sick, distinct parts of it from the non-distinctly against everyone. And not one person is allowing anyone to be honest about George Washington's extortion. And the nature of debate and the styles of it to get away with it is they say, oh, we'll force it to a sue or whatever like that. That'd be fine if the interbranch weren't forging and switching names and sequences while stacking evidences, crimes in those locations as collusion slash S, as they are to an extent only capable of doing. Forgiveness is to not leave it out the breaching method with blame. Black people, you guys cannot discern how it applied. Use of black pupils and whites of eyes. So how could you even entertain, even in other words, proper theories on history too? Like, for example, it is plausible that the famous line "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes" is not just about how our country had no means out of nowhere. We had no unity. And any nature of unity would also be used by the breaching method. In other words, all natures of unity and independence, the differences between things. Don't forget, we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time because there is a hyper-additional complete identity that is not each person's identity, but it can't help but be. And just like your hair is not your identity, but it is your identity anyway. Because there is the identity of hyper-relativity, the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. Nature itself shows us we need to refer to it as an identity of hyper-relativity. Nature itself shows us U/S of the phenomena of why and how people didn't take different math courses or legal courses We have the sciences abridged, and that's self-valued. And the time where we have people supposed to be education has all natures of organized crimes, distinct, juxtaposed, and the difference of them, slash S. Self-valued by roles with the predicate acts with facts method, readings of statutes and precedents, for example, that give the benefit of the doubt to the people at the formal legal locations. No, and the prisons tied to them, involved with the torture method our founders told us to demonstrate, associated with the torture, extortion, slavery method, preventing people free speech and pretending other, using all exceptions, real while making up fake exceptions to use them fake there. So everyone will be fake at all locations slash S. And then self-value more and more. How increasingly also all formal law locations and references of their value. In other words, have you heard descriptions of the causes of witch trials? There is a sickness where there are subject separations. And with our relative. So in other words, there's criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatments at locations, areas, and states, and they force suits and ties, encounters, and exceptions to pretend that unabridged sciences spoke anywhere, anywhere, ever, while tactically delusions wrong, slash hyper-tactically. Because it's not natural why and how it would go away if we have free speech at last. But in other words, so we have interbranch names, forging and switching, identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles not just on off corrections and judicial branch officers, and conjunctions and adjacents to it, and the difference of that use. That we're being exploited as an identity of value slash value progression. It is vertical and horizontal relative to the roles of predicate acts with facts, and a method of it where the database relationships are what are used to keep transparent and measurable and maintainable. Agencies self-valuing, collusions with the breaching method that shows Americans and other people from other countries how to interpret the value of things like voting, because it measures and maintains defenses of and uses of mandated law. Instead, still collusion slash S with roles at location slash S, A through Z, at locations A through Z, as per its use by the breaching method since before computers, capable already since before each modern country's name, since before modern religions messengers were born, the religions were born. The sciences already became abridged. Already, the nature debate became abridged, and other pretended for reasons that also the people doing that didn't even realize. You guys are trained to call things ego, tactically delusions wrong. You guys are taught to speak about emotions and passions, tactical ulterior from how nature shows us to. They're about the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. They're about how nothing is inseparable. Even if you make something up, there is a hyper-volume science, inseparable distinctly, but also non-distinctly, and from the smallest finite detail of what you make up, from the group details, and from the simultaneous voicings, like for humanity, inside locations, areas, and states, still abridged. We're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged. You guys are refusing to follow mandated law when people know predicate acts with child abusers since founding, with elderly abusers since founding, with veterans abuses. Have you seen the design of the buildings of the Veterans Affairs? See, there's people stacking, and there's roles with speaking for economics, pretending not to realize where that breaching method forced roles with economics before America even had any economics, and everyone had it, and everyone was already themselves, all locations, areas, and states. Roles with a hyper currently foreign influenced, which is distinct from currently foreign influence. A through Z are a certain type of victim, non-distinctly, but also sickly distinctly. But we never value how sickly non-distinctly, because how sickly distinctly is always counted wrong. And when where and how there are exceptions, those are self-value collusions too. See, when you guys have debate, when you debate differences, like black-white, in other words, like, in other words, the reason we have competition and reason other countries have competition with the economics leaving this out is because everyone left it out, and because they're directed to. Because that competition, the opposite of it, is also employed collusion / with a certain type of victim / hyper victim could only fathom it. Forgiveness is not to leave out the breaching method with blame. This took possession of the experts of the sciences. This took possession / S of what people know and how what they think and do with it. The same people that, in other words, are pretending just to be about education. Then you're gonna say, well, you're gonna fight for the campuses that have been abridged, the ones that are educating people, because everyone's going for money, leaving out how it employed that. In other words, then you guys want to have the nature debate. You can't do anything but afford self-value roles with Connecticut news locations. For example, attach me to fake conversations with themselves. As I gang theft, fraud, slanders, fake locations with themselves and with others. And changed conversations with myself and with others. With others around me. They also attach people. WFSB is in the process of confessing, demonstrating, recording, and confirming. They have collusions with people in various natures of federal crimes, in various natures of federal crimes, proving convicted felons, including some ones associated with and as co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with predicate acts against me on and off Connecticut courts before and after the World Trade Center attack, who had also been planting evidences in Connecticut. Connecticut's Harper courts, Connecticut's New Britain Superior Court, and the District Court have a whole bunch of people associated with the locations next to campuses like Central Connecticut State University, all sides of it, and town lines. As people enter cities with Wethersfield into branch and intelligence tied to them. We also have roles with more Sandy Hook predators with kids, including ones at the prisons and all the different natures of intelligence and police forms and courts associated with them and their family members and forensics locations. They have rules of wire crime acts and methods relative to where and to how they get away with pretending anyone spoke for logic or reason legitimately, let alone the law, convictions as the law. So they have all natures of methods of covering this up. These are also torture methods used against the elderly and of the veterans. If they're going to look at and this is relative to the subject's isolation. It's this instance with this. If this is an ongoing torture method, and they have them trapped in there. And they have uses of drugs and medicines crimes as the only counters, as the ones used remotely with the location/S uses, not just criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, but also hyper-criminally foreign influence. Nature itself shows us we're going to have to discern hyper-criminal foreign influences because they're recorded. And then so is recorded too, self-valued uses of criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, reason relative to the premises, treatments, and the nature of reason, justification, treatments regarding what principles can be gleaned from American history or world history. You guys left out, you guys attacked leaders' names because it was individual voices. Or even, in other words, even if an individual as a leader is right or wrong, as long as we get that what is true our way and care behind it, real science is everywhere. Real science knows that New York City is sickly distinctly impositioned upon and way worse by the torture, extortion, slavery method that designed the suburbs before America's founders were born to be a theater and to, while as an identity relationship to itself, as Earth and its and nature and its identity relationship to itself, distinctly non-distinctly type of intelligence, the way it works, it's causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in demonstration of that theater and of the captive value/value nature system/S, individually grouped into all together. Tactical ulterior from the hyper-native pure one. That shows us also the value increasing of the difference between president/chief. And the slash is a difference there too, because we are increasingly being demonstrated how there is a trinity manifest. And so the way it is grouped 3 ways. And how the phenomena, how it's grouped distinctly 5 ways. Distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously, /hyper simultaneously. And we examine this. There are means to observe how it is functional, how there are 5 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. And there are also 3 ways grouped. And English was revealed to teach this. See alphabet, see alpha in the alphabet. See we're see the phrase, I am the alpha and I am the omega. I learned that from the nature of religion. I only read up to the part of the Old Testament where it says all you have to defend and understand is right up to here in the part before it. I read a little bit further, like with the Adam and Eve story. But there's a part before that. This is all you need to understand is right here where the sciences share an identity. And the part before it. See, but you guys aren't being honest about readings of books like that. And like the Quran. The Quran also has a part right up front that says all you have to do is be honest about your use. About the calling the identity of the hyper simultaneous Allah or not as a scientific value. I'm translating that way. It also qualifies this, obligates any individual not to pray in any mosque for the slightest reason. You don't even have to pray. It says the only thing that matters and the most important thing is that you are honest about that identity of hyper simultaneous. Also directs the people of Islam to communicate with people who don't believe in calling the identity of hyper simultaneous Allah. It directs them to love them. In other words, and to have nature debate other than their being had. Because of how different slash S was and is exploited by the breaching method slash S, and where and how it employed the plural part slash S to increasingly hide behind, because nature itself is increasingly demonstrating to us. For example, there is the scientific value of a breaching method, a human fact treatment nature breaching method, having been one of the answers to what caused those crazy laws to have been entrenched and to have been sustained, distinctly against Native Americans, distinctly against the colonists, A through Z. And while the black-white used effectively to measure and to maintain other things, others, ourselves, blamed for the negative value nature progressions acts in natures, and timed collusion slash S with use slash S also distinct from all that caused by the assignments of natural communications to communicate what it doesn't communicate as. It will only communicate. It communicates only that it's only natural as criminal insidiousness. So many countless Americans, and since we are little kids, we needed to have this phrase, criminal insidiousness, used properly and understood. So criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments were simultaneous, with descriptions again that one they're trying to defend that can only self-value, obfuscations of and collusions being and having been with the breaching method, the predicate acts with facts delivery system method. If one, we don't have to be lawyers to discern. It was a predicate acts with facts delivery system method that had been entrenched and sustained against Native Americans and colonists, and then America's founders were born. It was already entrenched in Northern America and South America. How it is gotten away with, where campuses could self-value rules obfuscating this. One of the things they do on a mass scale, the best campuses and the worst, is pretend that they're caring if people do homework or not. They're putting fake motivations. They gave them those motivations from off those campuses. They've always been. The difference between the formal laws, private law names, they're all sides of criminal and civil cases, all sides of the crime scenes, including body dumping spots, including the World Trade Center, including the court next to it, including the spots next to it. Same ones intercities and interstates and off campuses that are not even connected. Speaking fake passions and emotions to pretend so others can record things to pretend like they know, like there's a Subby Scalora who has roles with a whole bunch of names with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and people involved with Glastonbury years ago. Glastonbury Intelligence, I don't know Subby Scalora. He's one of the ones that planted fake exceptions. In other words, as roles with also a Claudius Scalora at next to the World Trade Center, and then with people in the court next to it, and people increasingly involved with news locations. She has a boyfriend and cousins on Elm Streets in Rocky Hill, involved with WFSB with wire crimes, and planting evidences with names next to them, and as names next to Fox Connecticut News, including with a religious spot there. And Facebook has collusions with former director of the FBI with these names and their uses of New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, also with passion crimes and rape threats after the World Trade Center attack, because New Britain Superior Court's families and Harper Court's families and Connecticut's District Court recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed collusions Also with Weathersfield interbranch families, intercities, and at West Hartford locations, and next on off campuses, roles with child abuses, including leaders of the kids and abuses of their own kids to affect them to self-value roles, because they don't even understand the extent of it. For example, also this is part of the vertical and horizontal confessions, and where and how the confessions are related to how they stack fake things in databases, fake ties, and fake natures of ties between people. I never had a class with Justin Klavinskis and or nor with a Mark Violet. They have been planting evidences with the people with wire crimes and falsified police reports of Weathersfield police, and the names near me tied to them. Who a whole bunch of people from other areas are tied to Hartford Hospital with them. And the Institute of Living. They have a Leahy family of doctors. They attach me to whole fake conversations with them. And that was the first of 3 times. But 2 other times they have rules with the rape, threats, and things, and police forms changing digital evidences, and mail crimes and wire crimes, making fake conversations with police. And through the news, WFSB pretended I had conversations with police when I was a kid. I never went down there. I never had conversations with police, made a police report when I was a kid. They wanted me to, because in the other kids, they forced, tricked, her, persuaded to plant evidences with them and fake ties and fake natures of ties to me. They did that in the future too. And they don't understand themselves, because these are increasingly people that are making connections at each of the campuses I went with the predicate acts with facts, with people from off the campuses affecting it. There's a Kevin Harris who has a mother. I never had a class with Kevin Harris. He wasn't even in my grade. And they made me stay back my senior year so they could hide sequence shifts. And what I caught them doing, no, I didn't know a lot of people in my grade when I was a freshman. They were, in other words, the agencies in foreign countries overt criminal enterprises, at the same time they're being used by worse. This perfected method came from before modern countries. So all kinds of revelations are surging from who denies a predicate acts. Demonstrations of the same thing. In other words, who didn't deny that those laws, one of the things in which trial is about, even the whole thing was made up, is about the slavery method that was entrenched, the predicate acts with facts method that was and is entrenched. Because regardless of if the person's black or what they are, when we do this, in other words, these movies, and we make the hyper theater as an actual business. But in other words, we can do it just for free, like that. YouTubers across the world. We can get the individual leaders. We could take counter possession of the possession of all individual voices, because there is a subject possession, for example, that forbids proper use of exceptions and exception. Like, in other words, this is the subject. Oh, that's not part of the subject. In other words, there's a formally forced quality of fact treating nature as criminal insidiousness. Nature too shows us itself to call it criminal insidiousness / hyper-criminal insidiousness. Don't forget, this is increasingly sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly against people in using, in other words, whether they're for it or not. In other words, Native Americans, their difference is and has been the possession. If you bring up any American history subject, it is inseparable from that breaching method against Native Americans, non-distinctly as it was against our founders, but also sickly distinctly to measure and maintain that left out by people speaking for law and reason anyway. Abridged, pretending other. Styles that can't afford short words with convictions proper to be, let alone to protract. So please fix through administrations wire crime acts and methods and roles. Overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones. Militaries, foreign and domestic, including Saudis, I don't know the names of. And my Saudi friend, they forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to them not even realizing what with roles with WFSB, attaching me to fake conversations with them and with others about the World Trade Center attack. No, they have roles with people from Cuba too, before in the World Trade Center attack and since, involved on off Harvard Hospital with a whole bunch of names, involved with the wire crimes of the Wethersfield police chiefs, retired, in the same house, associated with this Phil Collo. I don't know where Phil Collo lives. He's been pretending. I never had a class with him, never saw him on campus. And my only time, one time from a distance, I saw him being handed a golden watch on the campus of my high school. And the people that were standing next to me were pretending to know me as people I caught involved with foreign and domestic men, increasingly tied to whiting forensics. People at Harvard Hospital involved with wire crimes and extortion and identity thefts and frauds and falsified police reports roles. Also with teachers of mine, like Anthony Agman has roles with that, and the Wethersfield police, who falsified police reports, fake conversations because they needed to hide life aggressions per and as their recorded roles with the vertical and horizontal connected predicate acts. And they have roles with wire crime acts and methods, switching names and sequences, informal cases, and increasingly has roles with insidiousness at all natures of locations relative, like body dumping spots that kept being brought up. And this is also verified on Facebook. They take people's Facebook pages because they have cover-ups of where and how the difference between overt criminal enterprises, kids, and adults, because that difference between adult or kid and the courts, kids and adults, and the police forms. Police Chief Cintron 1 year ago involved with various natures of federal crimes, federal evidence is crime, federal rules of evidence is crimes, with the same house /S involved with them, also with Afghan leaders and kids, no. And the kids and judges that speak fake things into records, and their family members, and their roles with each other, individually grouped in together, identity theft, fraud, slanders, making fake exceptions of knowing people with people that overtly do that too, that we don't know at all, like a Joshua Julie, increasingly one of the ones. Involved also with digital wire mail crimes at the medical locations, like Harvard Hospital, involved with neighbors of his also, with child defenders, intercampuses, people increasingly at whiting forensics, and roles all along Route 3 and Route. These are also people increasingly tied to a Josh Schumack, who is a stranger who sought me out with people that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him with involved with interreligious spots and black KKK and Confederate flag theme. Also, people involved with with the Facebook page of the Wethersfield Police Department and with whiting forensics through time, planting evidences at 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike, along Route 175 and Route 3, and from the founding locations that connect Main Street and Old Wethersfield connects to Route 175. So this is what they are leaking too, because they've been forbidding writing, so they keep stacking more faked writing and confessions. They switch names and sequences of arresting officers and make confessions about their roles with falsified police reports while pretending others simultaneously, per how we're going to observe recorded extortion and how they have the silence of Judge Napolitano. And we have need forgiveness because Judge Napolitano and experts A through Z are shock and awe relative to the subjects. If you observe, there are wars going on because people don't know what to do about logistical threats. And simultaneously, all locations, areas, and states, suits and ties, counters, and exceptions, self-valued, being and having been used, tactical terror, from what uses exceptions the way we know, but also hyper-additionally, as how it uses our questions and its means to communicate with us about difference / S, about how to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and the value of checking to make sure they're not criminal insidiousness natures of them. Nature shows us that too. But you guys have to follow mandated law so we could observe this. For example, the value of sequence true. Before the smallest finite detail now, like of the republic for which we stand. There had already been a sustained breaching method against colonists, and before that against Native Americans. And it was still sustained, and it is still sustained against all differences. This is why and how there are reservations, with houses worse than when there was colonization used. No one was allowed to even speak about building houses any other way, or they would hurt them and everyone around them, and worse. Everyone was had to go into internationally monitored contacts. Now, so they are still directed to keep state secrets for their roles with a whole bunch of different countries that are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed through communications. Self-valued. Oh, I didn't see that. In other words, they communicated this together. Their uses of their differences timed, as ones before the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. And how it was motivated is also recorded. That's why it's important not to look over the many single things that, who wants to debate what I'm saying. They've even put the FBI even has people roles with names that and courts and the police forms have foreign and domestic have roles with people putting comments on my thing. Now it makes it look like I'm rude to other people when I say that. It takes away from my being heard. They make all kinds of fake motivations for it. So in other words, please someone tell Judge Napolitano, because his Facebook page is involved after the World Trade Center attack. And in other words, before and after he left Fox Connecticut News, there are people involved next to Fox News with wire crime acts and methods that have the differences between the fake information the news planted with the interbranch families and the principal child abuser. And these are also kids of deans and of other principals, including one with the same school years ago. And his daughter, never met. I was in her president real quick. They try to make a fake exception. There's something to do with Kevin Harris's mother and family and people associated with them, like we're putting fake things in databases at and between campuses and with their kids. They have rules of predicate acts that Quinnipiac University is involved with various natures of organized crime, and not legitimately with unmarked police forms, who have roles, therefore, with all the elements of organized crime. They have roles of organized crime. They have roles of readings of statutes and of precedents with lawyers of FBI and of police, Weathersfield Police Chief retired, who are also involved with Russians, for example. Where and how Russians and Americans, we have the same breaching method that was forced since before modern countries were even, before modern religious messages were even born. It forced to begin and stay uses of value nature systems, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence, 3 ways, and roles with that denied. Then they're going to want to speak anyway. Can't afford to have defended any nature of free sciences, freedom, free speech has not been allowed for New York City. sickly distinct. The suburbs were designed to act like nature. It only allowed cities to unfold that way, people stacking. Walk down from that thing and then go, what, you're going to put a couple tomato plants in a pot? You guys are sick because we have to blame the breaching method. This breaching method employed also, it knew that people would blame other things, others or selves, and or self-value that while it was being sustained from semi-ancient times. More and more they would self-value that for how even anyone could even fathom. So in other words, one of the things we could make a video is about and show the leaders of the countries and the people of the countries means that they could means to fathom things that we could do that no one fathomed we could do to change the nature of everything. In other words, one of the things we could do is to agree simultaneously as the big nations like India and America and China, we have problems with our borders, Russia. We can make these positives, we can make a hyper positive /S out of this. And where and how we can't, as long as we're honest about it, we can make a hyper positive about that. And in other words, so one of the things we have to do, we can make this hyper theater about like a movie to explain to everyone the fastest way, where countries A through Z get forced, counter-tricked, counter-persuaded, and worse, to react to things, blaming others, other things, others ourselves for things that hyper-archetypal, anti-hyper archetypal criminal enterprise caused and is causing in the movies. See, Little Rap Guy and Friends are about this. Little Rap Guy and Friends have the whole cartoon value nature system, countries A through Z. They have a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. But it's to save humanity. Cartoon value nature is hyper-additional to, from, as, with, and for the human value nature system. Everything is hyper-additional nature. One identity of volume only fills. It makes more of itself through temporary / lasting space nature. And this is most probable and practical, and in other words, is more practical than what we are told by people who speak for practicality, people who speak for reason, people who speak for the value of expertise. We're going to examine recorded criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and rules with use of them at all locations /S, where they give the benefit of the doubt at the last second, for example, to the formal laws names. See, they've been, in other words, statutes and precedents already did that. And the difference between that and the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, the people next to the body dumping spots, the people next to the park, the locations, the schools, they're all being put in fake ties, fake nature, the tie identity theft, fraud, slander method. That's one of the things clearer than day. That breaching human fact, human nature, breaching method, the predicate acts with facts delivery system method. These are lists of things. This is a list of things the breaching method is. Always. Where and how we have it, blame the other things. Science and one honest integrity expert would have jumped between people A through Z when they're playing the black and white thing and calling it prejudice. To keep blame the other things, others ourselves. Why and how really there are negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And at locations A through Z, let alone New York City. So there are more World Trade Center predicate acts. I shouldn't have to beg to get one person from New York City on paper with the Connecticut interbranch. Get them on paper. Whole bunch of different police arrests for me since I was a kid. They've been stacking vertically. The court needing to hide life progressions tied to that, as rules of predicate acts with facts. You should fear God. Great tell.